Welcome to the Family Office, planning for the people who matter most.
If the numbers make a difference.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. So I know it. I know the difference. Mm-hmm. I know the difference when I get up in the morning. If the room was dark or light, if there's any light in that room, mm-hmm. I know the difference in the quality of the sleep. Mm. And I know with the frequency when I get, if I can get up in the morning and I'm like, dang, I don't remember anything after I went to bed. I'm like, that was a good one. That was a good one. And and I know because the room is cold and it's dark. Mm-hmm. So you ought to try that if you're listening.
Do you have blackout curtains?
I don't. I have shutters and they do a really good job.
Okay. Yeah.
As long as they're, with shutters, they gotta kind of, you can't just shut them. You gotta, there's that last
click. Yeah.
Is that last edge you gotta push and you'll know because they'll go click, 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 almost like a good keyboard clicks, you know? Yep. And that's when you know. And it's important more so for guys than women because men, it's important for everybody because you produce growth hormones at night and you can't produce growth hormones. We've talked about this before, I think, on the cardiovascular side. Cardiovascular repair only happens when you sleep.
Mm-hmm. That deep sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways.
Yeah, man. And I think another thing to add to that is the importance of having your cell phone in a different room if you don't have any self-control, or if you do have self-control, turning it upside down so you don't get that blue light.
I put it on airplane mode and I put it in the bathroom and I charge it in the bathroom because the airplane mode works. I've heard a lot about that, but I put it in airplane mode and I don't put it next to me anymore because I used to be one of those people that would fall asleep with it like this because but
absolutely,
the
crackberries when the blackberries were out. It's just,
crackberry. You're showing your age with that one because most people today won't even know what that means, by the way. But that was the original. That was the original. I would say crackberry is today's doom scroll.
Right. Absolutely. No doubt. That's a good way to put it.
So anyways, Len, a lot going on today. A lot going on. A lot. I did want to say that you'd be proud of me. I did some homework and I did realize something that it is the JCPOA, right?
That is correct.
And here's what I realized. And again, there's so many stark key differences between this and the MOU, right? Mm-hmm. This is, let me just read it to you, what these beautiful letters stand for. And then you tell me if this makes any sense.
Okay.
Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
It's just a fancy way of saying MOU.
Only a liberal could come up with something like that, Len. And Obama's not even that liberal. And I like Obama. I'm an Obama fan. I think he did a good job for the most part, as any president can do. But seriously, what we should have seen this coming when we seen what it actually meant.
Well, the reality is as we talked about last podcast, so far, the JCPOA, from my perspective, has been more effective. And so, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because we said we were not going to talk about Iran.
I'm not tempting you.
Okay.
No, that was the last one.
Yes,
that was the last one.
Okay. But let's talk adjacent because with the Saudi agreement, there was this Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States nuclear deal. I am really curious to hear your perspective on it because, of course, Iran is connected to all of this. But where do you stand on it? What are your thoughts about it?
I think it couldn't have come sooner. Okay. I think this is exactly what needed to happen 20, 30, 40. These types of negotiations. I wasn't in the room and I haven't done enough history research to realize it. Okay. One of the things I've been doing lately, Len, is I've been researching Latin America history and culture immensely. Okay. And it was prompted obviously because of World Cup stuff. There's a lot of stuff about Latin America that I didn't realize. You're like, whoa. This is intense. There's a lot of intense history.
And very complicated history in Latin America.
And the world doesn't really ever talk about a lot of it, right? That's going on.
At least not here in North America, that's for sure.
Of course. But what they talk about in Europe is the fact that they don't know how to air condition their buildings and their houses, and it's America's fault. But we don't want to get into that either. It's always America's fault. It's always America's fault. But at any rate, I think it's two clear differences.
Okay.
MOU and the JCOPA.
JCPOA. The Joint Comprehensive.
Yes. Let's make up a very long name so we have jobs. That's just
so it. We were going to talk about Saudi Arabia and Israel and the United States.
Yes. So here's the key difference.
Okay.
The JCPOA and the MOU, they have two. Well, the MOU has a few more things that it has to accomplish because we weren't in, at the time, kinetic. It was more of like a underground kind of war stuff going on.
Okay.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Obama liked that. Obama liked doing the surgical strikes, drone strikes. He liked using special forces. Obama was a special forces military guy, which is in itself very tactical, but at the same time very, very scary if you think about, from a communist or socialist standpoint, because, the government has to be in secrecy all the time. That just means it's just weird. But I don't want to keep digressing.
Clandestine operations.
Yeah, okay, clandestine operations. Even though the U.S. is really good at it, and Israel, we're all good at it. Russia's good at it too. Mm-hmm. The key difference is that one prevents a country from enriching uranium and building uranium to build weapons, and one country, while they're both, I don't know, you want to say shady? I don't know how to describe it. While they're both unscrupulous or a little bit on the fringe, Iran is clearly way. If you were to compare Saudi Arabia and Iran is on the way fringe. Okay. Saudi Arabia is like, hey, we want to play ball in the modern world, but we still want to do weird, I don't want to say it's Sharia law stuff, but they want to, wear the stuff and women don't have rights, all that comes with that area of the world.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia is simple. It's a civil deal. It's civil infrastructure. They want to build nuclear power plants. They want to do because they need it. And it's not because, we want nuclear energy. They know, and everybody knows, that they need desalination. And this is something that you and I have talked about a lot. They're not going to be able to power desalination properly and infrastructure properly with solar and wind. And they know that. So nuclear is the only clear alternative. And I think that if this gets done correctly, and the nice thing is America's going to do it. America's going to lead it. America's going to oversee it, and the allies. And in that, I think that you see there's money that we're a capitalist country. So we're operating.
There's no value judgment. I'm just saying,
that's our character, right? Like there's a saying, I don't want to keep going, Len, and give you time, but there's a saying that said that every person is born with their character. And the more you try to fight your character to do something that's not natural to your character, the more you're not going to enjoy it. It's like athletes who become athletes and they never become great because they really weren't ever supposed to become athletes, right? Like clearly Gavin Newsom should have been a politician because he's really good at it. But anyways, one is a civil deal to promote civil construction for infrastructure. The other prevents a country who clearly has said death to a lot of people, not just America, and has funded proxy wars and has clearly said they want to kill people with nukes. That's the difference. One doesn't want to play ball with everyone else, and the other does. And one's a civil thing, and one's to prevent a bad actor from getting a nuclear weapon. That I think is the biggest difference on the table today. Okay. Now, critics can say, Len, but that opens the door, obviously, for Saudi Arabia to then, because if human nature, who's to stop them from enriching uranium now at this point, right? That's the biggest
is complicated. It is definitely complicated.
Let me ask you this, Len. Is any Middle Eastern country, and I'm not trying to judge or throw shade, what is the opinion of, should any Middle Eastern country possess this ability? Should actually take countries out of it. Should nuclear capabilities exist in that region of the world?
Okay, so this is how I look at it. There's a lot of moving parts to what you said, and I'm going to try to break each of them down succinctly. So the last question you said is, should any Middle Eastern country have nuclear capabilities? I think the world is more dangerous as more countries come on with nuclear capability. So, because the thing is once you develop the technology to have commercial grade nuclear, all you have to do is make little adjustments so you can make nuclear grade adjustments. And so one thing I think that happened is the world saw that North Korea decided on its own to build nuclear weapons. And because of that, the moment they came online with the nuclear weapon, they got respect for everybody else. Why? Because peace through strength is a tactic that anybody can logically use to deter other people from bullying them around. The reason why Saudi Arabia depends on the United States is because of our nuclear weaponry and our arsenal. And so the main reason why they have a relationship with us is because they benefit from our protection. The reason why we decided to play ball with them is because they're a major player in the world stage as it relates to oil. And so if they agree to our terms with oil, it makes it more preferable because oil is controlled by the petrodollar, which ultimately comes back to the United States. Now, here's another wrinkle in the equation. The wrinkle is that the United States, I don't know if you heard this or not, but just recently, I think within the last 24 to 48 hours, Trump kind of stepped back on the agreement because he said the one condition that you need to concede to is Saudi Arabia. You need to agree that Israel is a state and it has a right to exist, and you need to validate their existence. Saudi Arabia has never done that. Why? Because there's always been this interesting relationship between Saudi Arabia and Palestine. See, Saudi Arabia believes that the Palestinians should have a separate state within those borders, and they need to be recognized and they need to be considered a player. Israel, of course, will have no part of that. Now, here's the problem. What Saudi Arabia doesn't like about Palestine is that Hezbollah has a relationship with Palestine, and Hezbollah and Iran are friends, and Iran and Saudi Arabia are enemies. And because Iran wants control over the Middle East, and so does Saudi Arabia. They want to be a major player, but Saudi Arabia does not have the nuclear arsenal that Iran has. So there's always going to be this tension. And the lever that exists between all of these parties is the United States relationship with Israel. So let me try to break it down simply. Is that President Trump is saying to Saudi Arabia, hey, you need to acknowledge Israel's right to exist and that they are an official state. And Saudi Arabia has said, okay, if we do that, the only way we're going to do that is if Israel decides to allow Palestine to have the right amount of land in that area. And so now there's always going to be this rub. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, because when Trump up the stakes and up the ante, what he's trying to do is he's trying to create more stability in the region. But there's so many competing and conflicting interests that it's so muddy. So I have no idea how this is all going to unfold, but it is going to be interesting to say the least, because every player has leverage in this whole thing. The United States has leverage because they have nuclear power. Saudis have leverage because they want to make sure that they continue with this relationship with the oil. And they also have leverage because of the fact that they have a mutually beneficial relationship with Palestine. Israel has leverage because they have a great ally in the United States. And so it's really, really convoluted and complicated.
I really think that the person who's probably getting the most pressure now in this situation right now is probably Netanyahu.
I would agree with that.
And to me, it almost seems like Trump is laying down the cards and the pieces to form that coalition that I have said that I think has been happening for a very long time. I don't think you can get peace in those areas unless you have coalitions or you have allegiances.
Yeah, like to NATO that point, the Abraham Accords, they want Saudi to officially be a part of it.
Yeah, I was going to say that the United States President Trump wants them to be a part of the Abraham Accords. So if he linchpins something like that, if something like that gets accomplished there, you're looking at the groundwork of what could potentially be a peace or an era of peace in that region, if you get that. Because the only way it's going to work is if everybody has allegiances. And of course, the Saudis want control because they still have ancient roots too. And, by forcing that move and them acknowledging that, that's if Saudi Arabia comes out and acknowledges that, and then and that forces Israel's hand to slice a chunk of land, and then you create a state called Palestine, what more are you going to argue about now at this point in that area? Because those are the biggest contentions: is the Palestinians don't have a place to stay, no one's acknowledging them as an official, their own people don't acknowledge them by and large by a lot. And then you have Iran in here, who seems like is always the one who's going to muddy the waters. And we aren't even talking about the past stuff. So I think it is putting a lot of I think that it's putting a lot of pressure on Israel more than anybody.
I agree. But I also would say there's a lot of pressure on Saudi Arabia too, because they're catching it from both sides. Here's the reason why. The United States is saying, so the United States is saying, Saudi Arabia, you need to be a part of the Abraham Accords. If Saudi Arabia decides to be a part of the Abraham Accords, it necessarily presupposes that they recognize Israel as, an official entity. They've never done that. And the reason why is, if you think about this, do you know where the most religious place on earth is for the Muslim community? Tell me. It's called Mecca. Do you know where Mecca is? It's in Saudi Arabia. And so because of that, so Saudi Arabia has a religious tension, because the Muslim world is really at odds with Israel for so many reasons. And so but Saudi Arabia is saying, look, we want to be a player economically. And the only way they can be a player economically is they have to be able to diversify out of their oil, because the only way to diversify out of oil.
They know they're dead within the next 50 years.
That's exactly right.
Because oil's dead in the next 50 years.
That's right. And if they
maybe sooner.
The only way they can diversify out of oil is that if Saudi Arabia becomes a destination for the rest of the world, like Dubai. They saw the playbook from Dubai and they said, you know what? We want to be a part of that. And we can create that because we have tons and tons of money. And so we want to be able to allow people to come here, to vacation here, to invest here, and we'll create favorable tax laws for the ultra uber rich around the world so they can have property here and let it sit there tax free. And that's another way to shelter money. So they see the playbook, but the problem is, in order to do that on the economic end,
they got to bend the
odds
knee
with the religious side.
They got to bend the knee.
That's right. And there's no easy answer. So I would not want to be MBS Mohammed bin Salman either, because he's either going to, have friends in the United States, but enemies within the Muslim community, or vice versa. Neither one of those are enviable positions to be in.
Yeah, I definitely think it's so, though I think it's a positive. And here's the
from your perspective.
But here's the thing, whether you want to think it's positive or negative or not, here's the reality. Someone's there forcing their hands. And when is the last time hands have been forced in those areas? Not like, we're going back and forth and diplomacy and kinetics and warfare or whatever. I mean, actual leveraged hands and positions are being forced. People are either being forced to use their hands or show their cards right now. And that's the biggest difference. It's just like watching a football game and you watch a player who creates action, right? Who creates market, or a market maker who creates markets. Donald Trump in the United States, with whatever's going on there right now, call whatever you want to call it. It looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It is a mover. It is creating movement in that area, new type of movement, or movement that we haven't seen in that area in a long, long time. And you know this because it's big things like that. Forcing a country to accept those terms and them even saying they're going to do it is absolutely groundbreaking to me by hearing that, because I've been around for 44 years. I've been listening to this garbage since I was 8 or 9 years old. It's the same garbage. It smells the same, looks the same, acts the same. But the difference here is that I've never heard someone force actions and acknowledgments the way it's being done right now. Okay. I think that's the big key difference. I don't know, before I jump back in, because I was going to say this earlier. Okay. I don't know the history well enough, and I'm going to go back and study it. I just don't know why Reagan didn't push more on it. And maybe he was just so caught up with the Russia and Mikhail Gorbachev and the falling of the Berlin Wall and East and West Germany and all that stuff coming down, because he was really he was a key playmaker, market maker, activity maker for that happening. And if Ronald Reagan hadn't done that, you wouldn't have what you have today in Europe. Donald Trump's doing the same thing in the Middle East, and maybe that's why Reagan just didn't have the bandwidth to do it, or maybe that wasn't the sharpest fire, the existential threat, or the hottest fire at that point.
Yeah. So I would say this. It all comes down to a matter of
you have more adult
strategy.
Perspective on it too, because you're older than me, so you were older than I was during that time.
Yeah, and plus, being a teacher, I had to learn history, so I needed to see the interconnectedness of all of this and stuff like that. And I was also around during the Iran-Contra issues with Oliver North and all of that stuff. So I have a bit of a perspective.
I was crapping diapers.
By no means would I say I'm an expert at all. So for those of you out there in YouTube land, we are just people who have an idea and we have an opinion and we try to base it in fact. So anyway, so going back to your issue with Trump, he looks at negotiations and he often does those tactics publicly. And so because of that, when he leaks information, he's strategic about how he leaks information, and his goal is to strong arm people based on the leverage he has. And that's a very public process. The United States historically in their dealings with Saudis have been very diplomatic, and it's been very much private. So for example, when 9/11 happened, I don't know how many people understand this, but a lot of the people who were a part of that attack was from Saudi Arabia. And the United States never really made a big deal of it because, one, a lot of their diplomatic interactions with Saudi Arabia was behind closed doors. So it wasn't public information that people readily understood especially if you don't actively study history. So because of that, they didn't have to have a visceral response. That's why they allowed Iraq to be the scapegoat. But the reality is, if you study 9/11 and that, Saudi Arabia was very involved in that whole process. And so a lot of the other presidents have taken the tactical stance of doing things diplomatically and private. Trump has done another one. So if you like strategy and public, it has its benefits and drawbacks, just like the other strategy has its benefits and drawbacks. Let me explain very quickly, and let's move on to another topic. The benefit of being a person who uses deal making in a public way is that people can see that you're the person that made these things happen, right? So a person with Trump's personality characteristics, that makes sense because he's a narcissist. And because he's a narcissist, he wants to be able to take the credit. But he's also understanding that if it doesn't go through, he's going to take the blame as well. So where he is right now is he's very, very unpopular in the United States. But if he can be seen as a person who's able to be a core lever in pushing more peace in the Middle East, then he's going to get the credit, deservedly so. But the flip side of that is that it takes away his leverage to do things in backdoor channels and do it in a more clandestine way because everything's in public. So the public is going to have more of a say, and what the public says and how they feel determines outcomes of votes. So that's where the downside of it comes from. So it's like I said before, and I'll say it again, it is going to be interesting to see what happens, because even though he's putting that on the table, Saudi Arabia has not agreed to do anything yet. And so only time will tell how this ultimately turns out, because we're talking thousands and thousands of years of conflict. One person's not going to come in 8 years unless something dramatically changes to shift the tide.
Well, I think that dramatic point in the world is right now, and it's happening. And I think that people who control the pieces at the top, they know it. I mean, when you have someone like Elon Musk, and I know Elon Musk is famous for saying wild things and saying things, but when you have someone like Elon Musk come out and say money's going to be irrelevant by 2036 or whatever it was that he said, that means that people know that the world is changing right now, right? And it's people already know what the world is going to be and where it's at, and a lot of us we before we even know. And that, I think, is what's happening right now. So they are forced. Again, their hands are being forced to make a deal. I'm curious, though. I'm going to ask you something, Len. What strategy is better? Because I think that the American people, or I think most people, probably not even American people, but I think a lot of people right now today, especially Americans today, they're sick and tired of two things. Number one, they're sick and tired of not seeing everything and knowing where everything and what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Transparency.
Right? The transparency level in America since the 80s has gotten to be atrocious. Yeah. More and more every year, every decade. If you look at each decade, you look at the 90s, you look at the 2000s, and then you look at the 2020s. Actually, no, whatever, how you ever call that, the decade between 2000 and 2010, and then 2010 to 2020, you look at that, transparency has gotten egregious and atrocious, and all you've seen is the people that are behind all the stuff that they're hiding it from have gotten richer and wealthier and more powerful and more control. And then the people that are working and busting their asses, you know those people. Then politicians like to call them everyday Americans. They virtue signal that we're looking out for everyday Americans. Those people, everyone in America, everyone, even the guy making $2 million a year, has gotten fleeced for the last 20 years, 40 years. And people are sick of it. Number two, people in America and the rest of the world, I think, are sick and tired of being told what to do. We are tired of it. They are tired of it because we see us being told what to do. And then we see these guys telling us what to do, called politicians, not doing it. So I think we've reached a point right now where the whole world is changing. So my question, Len, is what strategy works better? Because a lot of people can argue about Trump and his strategy, but guess what? It doesn't work all the time, but it seems to work more consistently and more effectively than the let's hide in the secret. Because anything that has to be a secret and classified, I understand certain things, right, Len, have to be classified. I understand that. But when you start to see the majority of things are the more secretive things become and the more it has to be clouded and filtered and shined and virtued and safety and all those crap, that is the big red flag that it's propaganda and some shit's going down. And people are tired of it. So to me, what's more effective, Len? We've seen what's happened for the last 40 years. Diplomacy, not diplomacy in general, but that method of diplomacy versus Trump to come in and go bam. And the last time we had someone that come in and went bam, granted he was more diplomatic, more polished, was Reagan. The last time you had an American leader that came in and went bam like that and you can't say Bush Jr. because Bush Jr. was forced because he had 9/11. So he was forced to go bam like that. But if 9/11 didn't happen, he would have done what his dad would. He just would have been calm and just under the radar and non-aggressive. Okay. That strategy works.
I'm going to answer your question, but I think neither strategy has been effective. And let me tell you why. So we're talking transparency and negotiating out in front. Hold on, let me answer.
But Reagan was very transparent. He had you filmed the White House. You got to see what he was doing, and he collapsed the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall, and he was boom about it. So
but there were a lot of clandestine activities that happened during that time because we didn't have as many news outlets and all of those things.
I'll give you that.
So here's the issue though. One thing I think as an overall, to answer your question specifically, I'm always more for transparency than doing things behind closed doors. But here's the problem, that I have not seen any worldwide global tactics that Trump has engaged in that has been effective so far. That doesn't mean that he's not going to be effective when it's all said and done. But everything that I've seen, like from starting the war in Iran, like I would say maybe killing Soleimani, maybe, but that wasn't really super consequential, except for the fact that the Iranians knew that any one of their leaders could be taken out. So in that regard, that was effective. I'll give that a W. But to answer your question, I think transparency is always better. But the problem is that when you're out there and you're transparent, you have to be transparent in every way. And you also can't make us as the American population think that we're stupid. So Pete Hegseth, I don't believe a word that ever comes out of his mouth, because he's just going to say whatever is politically expedient. He came out and announced that the Iranians' nuclear weaponry was completely obliterated. He said it's gone. And then he said we bombed them this was okay. So now fast forward from from June of last year to February of this year. Well, shortly thereafter, he said that their naval fleets were obliterated and their weaponry was gone, but now we're still having to go back and fight against them. He just got grilled the other day. I don't know if you saw it or not. He just got grilled from the Congress, and they would ask him point blank questions, and he absolutely refused to answer the questions. And so if you're going to have transparency, you also have to be willing to face the music. And if you don't have the willingness to face the music, then you've got to negotiate in public, operate in classified ways in private, and figure out strategically how to balance those things, because full transparency gives away our position tactically and strategically. You can't be completely on one end, but also hiding under the guise of classified, activity and top secret activity. You can't, then that veils the American public from what's going on. So I think you've got to have transparency, but you also have to be transparent about the fact that some information is classified. Just like the old line that Jack Nicklaus said. He's like, look, Tom Cruise said, I want answers. And he says, you want the truth? Yes, I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. The truth is, Chris, some real tactical activities that's happening, we as a public can't handle the truth. And I believe that some of those things need to happen behind closed doors, but they need to be transparent about when those things are classified.
Well, from my perspective, I think it's an absolute shame, and I don't know why they do this. Why would you even be interviewing Pete Hegseth? He shouldn't even be talking to anybody.
100%, I agree with that.
Because he's a defense secretary or Department of War secretary.
He's the one that goes in front of the cameras. Good looking. He's been on Fox. Yeah, he's used to being in front of the cameras.
I understand. Can hear him. I think it's a mistake, and I think that you shouldn't be interviewing because who's the top dog in the military? Obviously, it's the president, but underneath
Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of War,
whatever you want to call it, whatever word, word du jour. I don't care at this point. It's so silly. Like, the English language, if you study it, the transition of the English language over like 4 different transitions, it's so crazy. The English language is translated or has evolved. It's fascinating. You go look at why we say the things we say and why we do. Anyways, I get caught up. They should be. Pete Hegseth is not a statesman. And I don't mean that in a sense that he's not a statesman. I think he's actually a pretty good statesman, right? I think he's pretty good for who he is, but he's a military guy. He should not be out in front of the cameras because he cannot articulate a message effectively that way. It's like if you go back and you watch Eisenhower was a general, but Eisenhower survived and became president because of that era. If you try to put Eisenhower in an era, he would never get elected. Sure. Eisenhower got elected because we came out of World War II and everyone was like, dude, we want some stability, and we still, and he was that guy, and he was a phenomenal president. But under him, you got a lot of government oversight and security and the CIA and spy and all that crap. But it was paranoia. They should be putting Marco Rubio or somebody out there to translate that message and give the transparency, but he can give the transparency.
People trust him. People trust Rubio much more than
100%. But my point to that, Len, is you're probably going to agree, is he'll be able to articulate what's going on without giving away the tactical crap that can't be said out loud. Pete Hegseth can't do that. That's not his lane. He shouldn't be there. He's a general. He should be sitting in the war room or whatever going,
nobody should see him or
how do we end this thing fast? How do we get the frick out of this thing faster? That's what he needs to be doing. He's wasting his time. I don't know why we put him up in front of the camera. And it could be two things. And you might like this, Len. It could
he's a narcissist also. So Trump,
it could be that, right? Whatever.
But identifies with that.
Or it could be, and you might like this, it could be just Trump going, hey, the more on him, the less on me. You know,
there's probably a bit of that as well. So with that, Chris, man, it's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. What are your last parting words before we bid farewell to our audience?
Go USA, baby.
Love it, man. Well, hey, with that, if you like our information, like, subscribe. We always want to hear your feedback in the comment section as well. Till then, everybody, be safe. Take care.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Family Office.